Hello there.
And welcome everyone to this episode of BFG Reviews. As always, I want to thank anyone who's watched my previous videos and give an extra thanks to those who've liked, commented, or subscribed. You'll never know how much it truly means to me, so thank you. Now, on to the review, which is...
Did I frighten you?
Snow White. Directed by Mark Webb and starring Rachel Zegler as Snow White, Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen, Ansu Kavia as the Huntsman, and Andrew Burnap as as not Prince, Jonathan. And voicing the Seven Dwarves, Jeremy Swift, George Salazar, Andy Gutelushin, Jason Kravitz, Martin Kleva, Titus Burgess, and Andrew Barth Feldman, with musical guests, the bandits who fight in the name of the king. Anyway, this film follows the titular Snow White as she is forced to flee her kingdom and join forces with a group of bandits to retake her home from the evil queen. And join forces with a group of magical dwarves to retake her home from the evil still wrong, sorry. I really mean, and I'm sure I'm right this time, and join forces with a group of bandits and a group of magical dwarves to retake her home from the evil queen. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of 2025 Snow White. To me, it wasn't a great film or even a good film. At best, I'll give it a meh. Don't get me wrong, there are good elements and it can be very entertaining and delightful, but there are so many other aspects of this film that either don't work or don't go anywhere that by the end, there's so little payoff, the entire film feels empty. As you can probably guess from my description of the film, there is way too much going on for this supposedly simple story. And the main issue seems to be that the filmmakers couldn't decide whether they wanted to tell a reimagining of the classic tale for more modern audiences, or a retelling of the classic tale but in a different medium. And to me, they're both fine choices, but you have to choose one. Otherwise, you'll end up with a film that feels like two similar but completely separate stories forcibly fused together. The first is about a princess that finds a group of bandits that teach her how to take action as she teaches them how to trust others. And the second is about a princess who finds a group of dwarves that she teaches about teamwork and finding your voice as she finds her own. Either of those stories could work. They could even work together if each was given adequate time and came together by the end of the film. But as is, you end up with a film that tries to do so much that nothing is given the appropriate attention. Snow White's romance with Jonathan is marginally more developed than the 1937 romance. Her time with the dwarves feels rushed. We barely get to learn any of the bandits' names, and neither the dwarves nor the bandits have any real impact during the climax. And then there's Snow White herself, who is barely a character, which is really a shame because she is given some actually decent setup about how she feels inadequate, especially when comparing herself to her parents, and how that feeling of inadequacy led to years of inaction. But again, it doesn't really go anywhere meaningful. We don't see the evil queen instill or exacerbate these feelings, or the dwarves or bandits rebuke or debunk them. And Snow White just kinda gets over it by the climax, leaving her feel hollow. Now, Rachel Zegler does her best with what she is giving, but it doesn't help that most of her lines begin with, "My father always said," or "My mother would always say," or "When I was a child I always did this." Honestly, the dialogue as a whole in this film isn't anything remarkable. Most of it ends up being either exposition or Disney Channel heartfelt monologues. An example of this unremarkable writing are the 4 traits that Snow White and her father believe every great leader needs to be. These 4 traits are spoken and sung several times by multiple characters throughout the film, essentially becoming the film's anthem. and they're even engraved on Snow White's locket. So, what are the 4 traits that make one not only a great leader, but a good person? Fearless, fair, brave, and true. Anyone else notice anything? Fearless and brave are synonyms. Seriously, nobody stopped and thought, maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't use 2 words that basically mean the same thing in the film's anthem? To me, this simple yet pivotal mistake feels like a major lack of effort from the filmmakers. However, most of the cast still put in decent performances for what they're given. That is, except for Gal Gadot. I can tell she is giving her all, but she is just horribly miscast. I think this character requires a more stoic performance with occasional outbursts of mania, and Gadot was all manic all the time, and it just didn't work. I will say, there were some scenes earlier in the film where Gadot had to do some acting purely through her facial expressions, and there, she nailed it. It's just anytime she had to appear threatening or intimidating, it came across as silly. She may have looked the part, but she did not feel like the evil queen. It felt more like the evil queen from Descendants.
I'm Snow White. Who are you kidding? She's definitely had work done.
And no, it's not just because she was given a song. I actually think All Is Fair is a decent bop and could have been a great villain song, if again, it was more subtle throughout, only becoming more bombastic by the end. But, like I said, Gadot definitely looked like the evil queen. While I would have preferred to see more of her in the classic outfit, I thought the rest of her outfits were really effective, especially in conveying the queen's obsession with diamonds and gems. I actually think most of the costuming and set design was effective for this film. In all honesty, I liked the overall visual look of this film. I thought it all looked real enough while still keeping that fairy tale feeling. And yes, that includes the dwarves. Now I get it, they don't quite look human, and they are securely in the uncanny valley. But to me, that's why they work. They're not really meant to be human. They're magical beings that have been alive for hundreds of years. So I think the dwarves looking a little creepy worked well. I actually thought the film worked best when Snow White was with the dwarves. Their 2 songs, Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work, were wonderful at establishing the characters and showing some growth, and just so happened to be my favorite 2 musical numbers in the film. But if you ask me, I don't think the dwarves were originally included in this film. I think it was intended to be a full reinterpretation with the bandits serving as stand-ins for the dwarves. But when the whole controversy happened about the pretty benign comments made by Rachel Zegler and the leaked set photos, Disney lost all confidence in the film they were making and decided then to include the dwarves to save face. And they didn't even think about how to naturally incorporate these 7 additional characters. Instead, they just forced the iconic songs and scenes into the film and dropped the dwarves into the climax. They didn't do anything in the climax, but the dwarves were there. And it's the climax that is actually the epitome of what's wrong with this film, because nothing comes together by the end, making it feel like nothing actually happens during that climactic scenes, which makes the rest of the film feel pointless. And the worst part is that you can see gleams of a great movie in Snow White. Somewhere in this film, there is an excellent story about a princess that escapes her evil and abusive queen of a stepmother and finds her true strength as a leader after meeting and befriending several of the local residents in the woods surrounding her kingdom. That film could have had great messages about how inaction changes nothing, how kindness and compassion are virtues we desperately need more of, and how that true beauty comes from how we treat others. But this film is too focused on just including everything and not actually trying to incorporate it into the story, so all these messages and themes just get lost. Actually, if you just listen to the soundtrack, I think you get a more satisfying experience. That's not saying the musical numbers in this film weren't impressive, because they are. The musical numbers were probably my favorite scenes in the entire film. Many of them utilized the sizable sets with engaging cinematography and dozens of choreographed dancers. You could really feel the effort everyone put into these scenes. Sadly, my enjoyment of the musical scenes only elevated my disappointment in the rest of the film. Now, the 1937 Snow White is far from my favorite Disney film, but I can still respect it as one of the earliest animated feature films, and for establishing Disney as a studio that produces groundbreaking works of art. Unfortunately, this remake only further establishes Disney as a company that becomes more creatively bankrupt with each year. Honestly, after watching 2025's Snow White, I thought about reevaluating my thoughts on the other Disney live-action remakes. While most still aren't that good, especially compared to the animated counterparts, I think there were some early ones that actually worked. Up until around 2017's Beauty and the Beast, the Disney live-action remakes were more than just pale imitations. They continued the story from their predecessors, told the story in a new way, or changed the story completely by telling it from someone else's perspective. And now, Snow White is just another example showing how Disney is currently a company that is too afraid to take any real creative risks. Because in the end, some decent performances, amusing musical numbers, and a couple funny moments don't save Snow White from being an overstuffed mess that can't decide what story it's trying to tell, and why it earns a D+ letter grade, and a recommendation to go watch Snow White and the Huntsman instead. Remember that movie? It came out in I think 2012 with Kristen Stewart and Chris Hemsworth, and I referenced it earlier in the video. Yeah, that one with Charlize Theron taking a milk bath for no real reason. Go watch that. I'm going to. Anyway, those are my thoughts on 2025 Snow White. Let me know your thoughts on the film and the state of Disney in general in the comment section down below, as well as your thoughts on my art or what other films you'd like me to review. Thanks everyone, make sure you hit that like button, and I hope you have a fearless, fair, brave, courageous, and not scared day.